Define corporate governance. This is a nice short LOS to kick off this reading on corporate governance. Corporate governance is a set of internal controls and procedures by which firms are managed, a framework defining the roles of the people who run the company and the checks and balances put in place to ensure that it functions correctly. Good corporate governance practices manifest in several ways. The board should act to protect the interests of a broadly described stakeholder group. The dealings with the stakeholders should be entirely lawful and ethical. Shareholders' interests and participation should be fairly accounted for. The board and board committees should be independent from management control or influence, and daily operating management should be overseen by a system of procedures and controls. Describe practices related to board and committee independence, experience, compensation, external consultants, and frequency of elections, and determine whether they are supportive of shareowner protection. Describe board independence and explain the importance of independent board members in corporate governance. And identify factors that an analyst should consider when evaluating the qualifications of board members. In this video, we're going to tackle these three LOSs together. There is an element of overlap here, but basically we're going to go into some detail about board independence and the experience of board members before we briefly discuss compensation arrangements, the hiring of external consultants, and the frequency of elections. Okay, let's talk about board independence. The key to independence is that the board is free from management influence and control. An independent board is one that makes its decisions by their own judgment and is less likely to make a decision that is unfairly or inappropriately beneficial to management at the expense of shareholders. If you take nothing else away from this reading, even this whole section on corporate governance, take away the fact that board independence means a board that is free from the influence of management. Now, although independence is a bit vague and impossible to be sure of, there are a few things you don't want to see. One major point here is that board members should not have any business relationships with current or former employees, management executives, company advisors, auditors, or anyone with a controlling interest in the company. In fact, it would be inappropriate for board members to hold a similar relationship with even family members of these people as well. These relationships are a major red flag for a conflict of interest. To ensure that board members are independent, or at least act independently, the company should have policies against board members charging any kind of consulting or finder's fees for work done on the firm's behalf. Compensation should be limited to their involvement with the board. This more adequately aligns their interests with the long-term goals of the firm and the firm's shareholders, rather than their own personal gain. What about some other examples of ways to ensure board independence? The board should be made up of a majority of non-management members. The board should meet regularly without management present, and it is advised that the board chair not be held by the company's chief executive. These guidelines, among others, promote an independent board. Okay, let's move on and talk about board member experience. When it comes to assessing the qualifications of a board member, the key thing here is that an underqualified board member will defer to management to make decisions. That inability to make a decision away from management input promotes management control over the board. Basically, without the requisite experience and training, a board member will corrupt a board's independence. In assessing qualifications, it's important to consider that a board member could be asked to make decisions or act with competence regarding the business the company is involved in, the risks the business faces, the firm's future, their strategies, their plans, their financial issues, legal issues, etc. With that in mind, if we want to determine if a particular board member is suitably qualified to carry out the tasks expected of them, we must consider if they have any legal, regulatory, or ethical history, good or bad, whether or not they have prior experience serving on a board, any conflicts of interest preventing them from acting in the best interest of the shareholders. Do they have designations or qualifications that would be necessary for anyone acting in this capacity? And lastly, do they have any experience with the industry? Aside from qualifications, have they got the hands-on experience in the background needed to be competent for this role? Okay, moving on, compensation for board members. Not the most extensive section here. Board member compensation should align the interests of the board member with the long-term objectives of the firm. That's the main point to remember here. We will go into more detail on how that's implemented in the discussion on the compensation committee, but for here, it's just that they align the interests of the board member with the long-term objectives of the firm. What about external consultants? The board should be able to seek specialized, specific advice when they need it. Now, this might come about to deal with issues like risk, mergers and acquisitions, legal, regulatory, or matters concerning the company's reputation. The board shouldn't need management approval to seek out those external consultants, and they should have the authority to command a budget if needed. Finally, then, the frequency of elections. It is vital for the fair and efficient functioning of a board that shareholders have the right to change the board when a board member does not act in their interests, or when a member with new expertise is needed. A well-functioning board will have mechanisms in place that allow investors to exercise these rights and not limit them. When reviewing policy regarding board election, an investor should consider the following. Is the voice of the shareholders being adequately heard? Is the board comprised of members that have staggered terms, where continuity of expertise is maintained and there is a regular reshuffle in the membership? What about vacancies? Can management force a new member on the board without shareholder approval in any scenario? And what about member approval? Do the shareholders have adequate power to remove a board member they feel is not acting in their interests?